Okay, we got sound. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Lev, and this is Mike Clark, as you guys probably know. So this is kind of a first webinar for us across Canada. So if we have hiccups, as you've seen already, just bear with us. If you have any questions, you can definitely use the chat, and we have Corinne on the chat as well to answer some of them. If you have questions regarding what Mike is talking about, we'll probably interrupt him and ask him the questions regarding the specific topic. If you have questions later on about a different topic that he's talking about, we'll wait for him to finish the segment, and then we'll ask him. I think we're ready to start. Sure. Yeah.
How to laser engrave photos, and really what we're talking about here is sort of an A to Z type explanation on what you need to ask your customer for, what types of photos to look for, what type of changes are you going to make in the software. You can see here, we're talking about bad lighting versus good lighting. Is there too much color cast in it? Good normal color. A lot of people think that you make or break the photo when you're actually doing the adjustments in the software. I typically tell them that the make or break is when you actually get the photo from your customer. So if you ask your customer for the proper photo and they give you the proper photo, a lot of what we're going to do in terms of software adjustments are going to be pretty basic, pretty easy, and you're going to get a pretty good result. Again, my suggestion, if you really want to get into doing photo engraving, is to go through this slide presentation and read up on about it. It's got a lot of good points in there, and basically can help you out. I'll go quickly through this just so we can see it. Again, you have good detail. Again, a photo like this, if you're trying to get this photo here, you notice you've got a lot of extra info in the photo. Where we're too far away. This photo is a lot closer, so we get better detail. And again, if we were looking for this person, well, again, he's on a tractor. Well, what do we got here? We got people in the background. We got trucks and everything. This photo is a lot better because it's really just the person in the photo. Is the focus good? Again, we've got a bad focused image here. We've got a good focused image here. So again, there's, if we get the photo from the customer, is it a good photo in terms of good? Is it compressed a lot, or is it not? Has a lot of information? You can see the image on the left has been compressed a lot, and when we zoom in on it, you can see that there's minimal detail. Well, if we don't have a photo that has a lot of detail, then basically when we laser engrave this, the bad detail is going to come through in the laser engraving. It's certainly a lot easier to create a good photo when the actual photo itself is of good quality. So again, I talk about JPEG compression in here. And again, if another important thing is to make sure that you zoom in on the photo. Here's another example of a bad photo. Again, if we zoom in on it, you can see that there's very minimal amount of detail in the photo. You can see that when I laser engrave the photo, the quality isn't as good as what we would normally see if we had a better quality photo. If I get a better quality photo, as you can see, this photo shows a lot of detail. And when I laser engrave it, there's a lot more detail that comes through. So again, a lot of times, the secret to a good photo is getting the good photo at the beginning. I always tell people that the most important thing you can do is when the customer gives you the photo, don't say, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'll get to it, around to it. And then basically you open it up, 11th hour. You're ready to do the job. The customer's coming tomorrow to pick it up, and you pull it up, and you're left with, you find out that you've got, this type of a photo. Because ultimately what's going to happen is now you're stuck because the customer's coming tomorrow and they're going to want, a finished product, and you're not dealing with a good photo. What you want to do, what you should have done, is get the photo from the customer, zoomed in on it, and said, this photo isn't very good, and therefore, is there some other better photo that we can get that will be a better representation when we laser engrave it? So what you're going to ask for them is to get a photo like this. Because as I tell people, there's no sense accepting the photo to laser if the information they're giving you isn't good enough in terms of the photo quality. And again, there are some other issues here. You can see that when the image is of low quality, when I start to do some adjustments to this photo, you can see that I get blockiness in the photo. And again, this will transpose itself when I actually create the finished image that I'm going to laser engrave. So again, you know, I knew what to look for. I zoomed in on the image. I found the blockiness in the image. So again, I made some adjustments to try to adjust for the different low quality of the image that I had. Again, here's an image here. You can see that, again, somebody has a baby. They want the image laser engraved. Well, you know, when you convert the image, it doesn't matter how good of a photographer converter you are of the image, you're just not left with a lot of good information. And you're probably better in this case to say, I can't do it. Because again, you don't want to sit there and you know, spend a lot of time on it and then at the end of the day, really not come up with a half decent image. Another important consideration is making sure that we've got good power and speed. What I mean by that is that a lot of times people have problems with laser engraving photographs because they use too much power on the actual image. As we know, speed and power work together, and the more speed I have, the less power I have. So it's always very important to make sure that you're not using too much power, because if you have too much power, you can basically obliterate the image, and you've got a good conversion, you may lose that good image by just using too much power and too much speed. So again, it's always important to test. You can see here's an image that a customer gave me a number of years ago. You can see that they were complaining about the quality of the photo, saying, I got this really good photo, but it's not lasering very good on anodized aluminum. They were using 100 speed, and at the original time was using the manufacturer setting of 40 power. Well, you can see that at 100 speed and 30 power, I've lost a lot of what the image looks like right here on the screen. If I start using less power, you can see now if I go to 20 power, the image is getting better. If I go down to 12 power, you can see how much more details in the image. I haven't done anything to the image. All I've done is basically adjust the power and speed. So it's very critical when you're actually working with photographs that we use the least amount of power that we can use on the certain material that we're working with. Again, and that necessarily isn't always following what the manufacturer says. So again, you can see that the manufacturer is suggesting too high of a power, because this power is probably basically designed for just doing text, but it's not designed for doing photos. So I may have a power here for text, but I also need a power for photographs. So again, very, very critical that we get the power and speed right for the material that we're working on. So again, the original's on the left, the final image is on the right. You can see I'm getting the actual background image here. Look how much more details in the planes. And again, that's just all due to power. Nothing different in terms of what I've done in terms of adjusting the image. Again, yep. The question we have is, are the powers the same on all the machines? No, they're not. Again, if you've got a 60 watt powered laser, then you're going to have to make an adjustment for your machine. If somebody's got a 40 watt laser, their settings are going to be different than the 60 watt. So again, if you look in your presets in the driver, you'll find a starting point for it. But again, normally what I'll typically do, and I'll bring this up, and it's brought up in the actual slide presentation here of how to actually adjust. What I normally do is I create a rectangle, and I start laser engraving the rectangle, and I try to get a good looking rectangle with the least amount of power that I can get away with. So I may send something over with 100 speed and 30 power, and then I may do something with 20 power. I may do another rectangle with 10 power. You can adjust on most machines, we can adjust the power on the fly. But again, if you want to just do a small little rectangle, do one at 20 power and do one at 15 power, do one at 10 power, and do them side by side and just see which one looks the best. Okay, maybe do a photograph. Maybe I've always suggested to people, call your local sales rep, get a photo from them that they know, excuse me, that works good, and try it on a couple of different materials with a couple of different powers and see what looks better with the associated power that you want to try. There's never really a golden rule because certain wood is better with a certain power, and another wood might be not as good with that same power. So you might find a pine generates a more brown image, so you might not need as much power on that because you get a darker, good contrast image versus maybe a maple image that doesn't generate as much of a brown background. So, and you might need a little bit more power for the maple than you do for the pine. So it's really sometimes, it's certainly machine specific depending on the wattage of your machine, but it's also product specific too. And what we'll do is we'll maybe show a couple of images when we're actually lasering the photo so you can see the difference, whether it's on acrylic or whether it's on wood. And I've got a couple of different woods here that we can show. You can see up on the screen here, if I'm using too much power, you can also see how the black line actually is here with one power. And if I use the same image, and if I use 3% more power, I've actually blown away the actual line in the image. So just a little bit of a movement of the power in terms of percentage is higher. I've actually now used too much power. And what I end up doing is making my laser dot bigger, which then starts to obliterate the surrounding area. So again, it's very critical that we try to do proper power and speed that will work good for us. Again, here you can see, here's some vector lines. And again, you can see 10 power, 30 power, 50 power. You can see how the width of the vector line is actually getting wider. The same as the raster line. The 30 power is not as wide as the 60 power, and 100 power is wider than that. So again, too much power really works against you a lot of times when you're actually doing photographs. So it's very, very critical that we make sure that we're using very minimal amount of power. I mean, we still have to have enough power to get a good looking image, but you need to be cognizant of making sure that the power you're using isn't generating overburn. Yep. Yeah, the question is, do we convert the image to grayscale? Which we will get into once I'm just going to go over this briefly, then we'll take a look at actually working with a photograph, and I'll show you the steps of what to do. This is very critical. I think, when we used to teach people photographs, we'd go into the software and we do all the adjustments and everything like that. And, we'd laser engrave a photo and I would get a good image. And then people would go home and then they would try their image and they didn't follow all these steps before where they're getting proper power and speeds, getting good photos, and they could never get a good looking image. So we'll get into that. I just want to go over this. I suggest that you read this and digest a little bit more than what I'm doing here. And once we go over this quickly, then I'll pop into the software and basically we'll look at doing an adjustment. Question is, if we have too much power, why do we not speed up? And it certainly would be an option. And again, if you're running too much power, you have two ways of adjusting that. You can either lower the power or you can speed the machine up. Again, typically what I'm always trying to do, and for most people, we're typically trying to do the job as fast as we can. So if we're trying to do the job as fast as we can, then we're always going to run at 100% speed and then adjust the power accordingly for whatever we want to do. I'm certainly not laser engraving at 50% speed. I'm normally engraving at 100% speed, and then I'm going to adjust my power accordingly so I have enough power. If I need more power and I'm at 100% power, then I need to start slowing the machine down. But certainly there's no reason why we can't be running at 100% speed. Okay? I just want to quickly go through here just to see if there's anything else on here that, again, if you want to read this, we can take a look at it. I'm going to pop out of here and let's go to an adjustment on actually on a photo. So here's a photo that I've opened up into Corel Photo Paint. And again, you can do some of these adjustments in CorelDraw, but I always like to do my adjustments in Photo Paint, and then I'll save the image and then I'll import it into CorelDraw. Again, if you want to see some static tutorials, maybe remind me at the end of the photo, George, and I'll go through through my tutorial website that will give you some help. Again, I've opened up the image in Photo Paint. Photo Paint is a free program that's included with the CorelDraw suite. And basically what we're going to do, and the reason I use that program is for a couple of reasons. One is the image is portrayed a little bit cleaner on the screen. The other reason is a lot of times I'm actually going to knock the background out of an image. And I can only do that in Photo Paint. Again, when we're running an image on wood or acrylic or granite, things like that, what we typically don't want to have is the actual background. So what I want to do is remove the background. I want to keep the two people that are in this photo as my source objects, and I want to get rid of everything that's around them. That's very easy to do in Photo Paint, and we can actually remove the image. So I'm going to go through the removing of the image. We're going to do some adjustments to the photo, and then we're going to bring the photo into CorelDraw. So, yep. What about a 30-watt laser? Certainly no problems doing a 30-watt laser. Again, depends on the material you're working with. Again, I'm probably thinking with a 30-watt and you're doing wood photos, you're probably going to be somewhere around 100% power and probably around 50, 60 speed on a Trotec if it's a Speedy 100, something like that. The question's asking, I think, do different machines have different powers and speeds depending on the wattage? Which is true, yes, exactly. I mean, again, a 60 watt is going to burn deeper at 100 speed and 100 power than a 30 watt is at 100 power and 100 speed. And if it's 30 watts versus 60 watts, it's going to be twice. So for example, if I have a 30 watt machine and I'm running 100% power and 100% speed, and that's the proper power and speed, and all of a sudden then decide to run a 60 watt machine, then I'm going to be running 100% speed and 50 power, because it's basically 30 watts is half the power of a 60 watt. What the ideal settings are very difficult to come up with. But I'm going to give you my settings for the machine that I'm going to practice on here, and hopefully that will give you a little bit better of an idea on how to adjust your machine for the powers. But all I can say is, when you laser engrave, you don't want to go very deep in the material. The deeper we go into the wood, the worse our photo is typically going to look. So normally when I laser engrave, I want to have a very minimal amount of penetration into the physical wood itself, or the acrylic, or or plastics, or things like that. If we're working with stone or glass, typically we don't have any penetration, so that's a little bit easier to do in terms of power and speed. So when I'm adjusting a photo, the first thing I normally want to do is, in the case of this photo, I want to even the colors out a little bit on the photo. You'll notice here I've got nice light colored skin on the faces. I do have, this is a little bit dark down here, and I typically I want to adjust for that. I can do that a couple of different ways. Typically what I'm going to do is I'll use the tonal curve here. The image on the left is the original image. If you right click in this window, you can zoom out, so you can actually see the image. If I left click, I zoom in. I can hold the mouse back down and move around. So what I want to do is I want to lighten this up, but I really don't want to adjust this too much. And what I'm going to do here is that if I click here and then I move this curve, you'll notice on the screen, you can see the difference, hopefully, in how much lighter this is. These are the dark pixels in my image getting lighter. And I'm going to actually make my lighter images, which is the face, not as light. And again, if I come back and click on this, I can move up a little bit, and that will lighten up my darker values even more. And again, if I need to darken this up, I can move this way, and I can, or if I want to lighten it up, I can pull it this way. This, or darken up, I pull it down if I want. This is kind of an S curve. It's kind of a standard adjustment curve that you'll see with this type of tool. But it's just a quick way of making this a little bit lighter, because right now this is too dark on the left, and when I laser engrave it, this is going to come up fairly black. And by making it lighter, I'm going to get a little bit more detail when I engrave. I'm going to say OK. And now you can see how much more detail is seen on the screen. The biggest thing to get over for a lot of people when you're working with photographs, when you want to laser engrave them, is you actually end up making the image look very bad on the screen in terms of detail. But it's that minimal amount of detail that allows us to get a good looking image on wood or acrylic, because that product doesn't show a good detailed image. So because it doesn't show a good detailed image, then we need to give it an image that doesn't have a lot of detail. And it sounds a bit like an oxymoron, but ultimately this is the way that we adjust. If I'm printing out to a full color printer, then I may not make the adjustment because the printer may actually show the detail in the colors that I want. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to remove the background of the image here. That's very easy to do in Photo Paint. I'm going to go to Image. I'm going to go to Cutout Lab. And what I'm going to do here, actually, sorry, before I go ahead here, I just need to do one other thing before I do that. I'm going to resample the product, the photo here. And what I mean by resampling is I want to make it the size that I want to engrave it at. And what I'm going to do here, I want a 5 by inch photo width. And by typing 5 in here, it automatically makes the height adjustment to 3.3 inches. Say OK. This is very critical that we basically have the image size before we go and make all our adjustments to it that we're going to make for laser engraving it. I'm going to come up here to Image. I'm going to go to Cutout Lab. And what I'm going to do is I want to get rid of the background, but I want to leave the actual the people, the two children here in the photo. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to trace out what we want to keep and what we don't want to keep. And I'm going to use a little bit of a nib here. And you notice when I draw the nib here, that line is a little bit too thin for me. I want a little bit of a thicker line. So I'm going to come up here to the nib size. I'm going to make that about 60. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start to trace, and I'm keeping the half the image on the green and half the image off the green. So notice here that half of the background is in the green line, and half of the original, the image I want to keep, is on the other half. And what that basically is doing is the software is going to sample the colors in the background, and you can let go of the mouse if you want and stop and get a good grip, and then keep on tracing out. So what the software is going to do is it's going to basically sample the colors here and samples the colors here and try to figure out where the cutoff point is for the image. Again, I've gone a little bit too wide here. I can come up here to the eraser tool. It allows me to erase out a little bit of this. And if I want, I can add in and to make this a little bit wider here. And I've sort of got my image. So anything that's going to be out here is going to be gotten rid of, and anything in here I want to keep. Now, the software needs to know what I want to keep and what I want to get rid of. That's easily done by the fill tool. I come inside, I click inside here. You notice that the blue color is telling the software that I want to keep this and I want to get rid of that. For that to work successfully, we have to make sure that this green line touches the bottom here, and this green line touches the bottom here, which then allows us to capture the fill. If I had a gap here, then this wouldn't fill. I'm not going to worry too much about the hair right here. I'm going to get rid of that. I can bring that back if I need to after the fact. We're going to click on the preview button. And you notice here now I've actually gotten rid of the background. And again, now what I'm going to do is if you notice here, I've got some areas where the software's been a little bit more aggressive and it's gotten rid of some of my initial image. I can bring that detail back. I click on this plus symbol here. And basically what that is that's the add detail. And again, you notice here that my nib size allows me now to draw back in the original. So again, if you've lost a little bit, it's not really a big detail. We can bring that back in again. Okay. If you press the H key on your keyboard, this allows us to move around. You can see my cursor's become a hand. And again, that allows me to move around. And I'm looking to bring a little bit more detail. Again, you can see there's some wisp of hair here. I wouldn't worry too much about this. This detail is still going to be there. Again, we've got some excess here we want to get rid of. I want to get rid of some detail. I click on the remove detail. And then I come over here. And basically, I'm just holding the left mouse button down and I'm dragging over. So anything that shows up inside the cursor here is going to get rid of. Press the H key back as my hand tool. Again, I've lost a little bit of detail here. I'm going to click on my add detail. I'm going to bring a little bit more back. Click on the H again, move around. Looks like I've got some good detail here. Again, we can just test here. Looks like I might have lost a little bit here. Yep, there we go. That's back. Again, if you've got, here's a little piece of the background here. It's not a big deal for us, but again, we could get rid of this after the fact. We could click on this tool right here. Notice that this cursor is a little bit too big for the area here, so it takes away the edge. I'm going to go Control Z and undo that. I'm going to make my nib a little bit smaller. We're going to go down to about 30. And that allows me now, if I want, to get rid of the inside detail here. Now, the only thing we need to check for is sometimes what we're going to get with an image, you can notice there's a little bit of black in the background here. And sometimes it's hard to see, and it's very critical that we check for that. And the easiest way to check for that is to come back over to the background, and we'll make a grayscale. And you can see that we've got some remnants of the actual background that haven't been erased by the actual software itself. So again, what we're going to do there is we're going to basically zoom back out again. And you can see that there's some information here that we need to get rid of, because if I bring this into the software to engrave it, I may start to get the halo around the outside here. So that's again very easy. We're going to click the remove detail button. And I'm going to just click on here, hold the left mouse button down. I'm going to get rid of this right here, let go of the mouse, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, and I'm going to get rid of this excess background here. And again, you don't necessarily need to be perfect. If you have a little bit of issues on the edge here, once we do our conversions, a lot of times you're never going to see this when it laser engraves anyways. If I hold the H key down again on the keyboard, allows me to move the cursor. Again, we're still on the remove detail. I can get rid of what's in the background here. So there's the background gone. Click the H again. And you notice I've got a little bit of excess over here, and I'm going to get rid of that right now. And we'll get rid of this down here. And now we've cleaned the image up pretty good. Another issue sometimes that you might have is that if you've got say you've got a black shirt and a black background, we can show the original image in the background, which then gives us the ability to, when we're removing the detail, we can actually see what the old background used to look like. And again, then you can trace along the edges here. So again, sometimes you might want to show the original image, which might make it easier to know where the two black colors are sort of merging together, because sometimes the software is not very good at picking the difference between the two black areas. Yep. The question is if I want to look like a pencil drawing, then normally Corel has a pencil effect drawing in the effects menu, which you can actually use. Again, I can take a look quickly at that if we want. I'll go through my standard adjustments and then we can come back to that and take a look at it. When I'm done, I'm going to just say, okay, just make sure before you do this that you've done all the adjustments on the image, because once the adjustments are done, if you want to go back and redo this, you have to start right from scratch again. So again, it's very critical that we make our knockout of the background perfect when we're inside this window. And again, I can't stress how critical it is that you get rid of the detail in the background, because a lot of times when we're laser engraving, a lot of times the background really affects the quality and the look of the image that we're working with. So I'm going to say okay, and you notice now my background is gone. I have what is called a transparent background, which is dictated by the rectangles in the background here. And basically, this is the image that I want to work with. You notice here, you know, again, I've got my background here has been also taken away where I removed that detail. Now, the next step that we have to do is we need to convert the image to grayscale. I never laser engrave photos in color. I always convert them to grayscale because I use the grayscale image to find out where the dark parts of the image are and where the light color images of the image are. And it's a lot easier to see that when we're in grayscale as opposed to when we're in color. And again, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to image, and we're going to go convert to grayscale. Now, when I'm in photo paint, again, I have a couple of adjustments here. Again, if I right click in the left window, then I can zoom out so I can see the way the adjustment is happening on my image. Now, the red color is, you can notice here that I've got hopefully a little bit of a red tinge in my drawing. So when I adjust the reds, it's going to make a fairly dramatic change to the image. And again, I'm going to slide this over. You know, certainly red is something, you know, when we don't, you know, red is typically an overcast, what we call a color cast in an image. And a lot of times, if you're indoors and you're under normal blue, you know, normal white light, you might get a blue tinge. You know, outside might give you a red tinge. You may get sometimes in a lighter room with incandescent lighting, you may actually get a red tinge too. So sometimes the lighting will fool the camera sensors and create a color cast. So what we're doing here is I'm adjusting the red here. I'm actually going less red. So if I actually go all the way to the left, you can see a lot of the red actually leaves the image. I'm not going to go that far, but you can see that I'm actually lightening up the image. What I'm looking for in the photograph is it's not really making a lot of adjustments to this part of the image. What I'm trying to make the adjustments for is what's in the actual face of the people. You can see that these areas here are getting white. I'm trying to create some stops and starts in the image. So you don't want to, when you're engraving a photograph, you don't want the face to be a monochrome grayscale. If it's a monochrome grayscale, then you're not going to see any detail. The fact that I've got some darker grays here and some white areas is going to create some detail to my face, and your face, you're going to trick your eyes into seeing more detail in the actual image. You can adjust the yellows a little bit if you want, and then basically we say okay, and now the image is in gray. To me, this image is still a little bit too dark, and the way I'm going to get around that is I'm going to go to the adjustment, contrast enhancement. I'm going to go to reset, and I'm going to pull this top slider to the right a little bit. This is going to darken the image up. That's going to make the shadow images a little bit darker. And you notice here, this is the white part of my image. So these are all the white pixels. So this image is fairly dark to begin with because the pixels concentration is more to the dark side. So I'm going to slide this slider, and this is going to push my whiter pixels. You can see how my image lightens up. I still want to bring a little bit more lightness in this part of the image here. So I'm going to use the gamma adjustment, which is kind of like a brightness contrast. And if I slide to the right a little bit, you'll notice in here, my whole image is going to the right a little bit. Okay. So you can see my original image on the left, and you can see my new adjusted image on the right. Question? Yeah. Yeah. So people are asking me if there's other photos to use. You certainly can use any photo editing software you want. So again, if you want to use Inkscape, I haven't used Inkscape too much to know if they've got all these commands in here. Certainly Photoshop would be good. A GIMP would be a good program. You know, the tonal adjustment, the contrast enhancements, converting to grayscale, those are all basic imaging tools that are found in any photo editing software. So it really doesn't matter what you're using. What we need to do is make sure that we get to a black and white image, and we can, even if you can't do that in your photo imaging software, we can still do that in CorelDraw. What you see on the screen, to me, is, even though some people will say it's a black and white image, to me, it's still a grayscale image. I still need to convert this down to a black and white image where I get rid of the shades of gray. So at least if you get it to this point, you can still bring it into Corel and then convert it the one next step down. Some people use other programs that are freely available, Pixelmator. There's lots of different programs out there that do photo adjustments. Again, we use Photo Paint here because a lot of people are using Corel, but if you want to use Photoshop, bring it into Illustrator and then basically print from there, then, and as a matter of fact, you could print directly from Photoshop or Photo Paint directly to the laser machine. Typically, most people want to put text around the image after the fact, so normally we'll bring that into Corel after and put some text and everything. Maybe you want to cut the image out, and again, you need to do that in CorelDraw, so then we need to bring the image into basically back into CorelDraw. So I've basically done, again, if I reset, you can see I've gone back, and again, if I go through that quickly, I'm just slide this over. I'm going to bring my slider over here. Bit of a personal preference on how much to do this. I'm going to bring my gamma adjustment to the right. You see how this, if I bring really far, you can see how much wider the image is getting. Remember, some of this adjustment, this gamma adjustment and everything in terms of the contrast adjustment is all based on the material I'm working with. If I'm putting this on wood, I'm making a higher adjustment than if I'm doing this on anodized aluminum or something, or a material like that, where I'm not getting as much of a black image. And you'll see a little bit of a different engraving qualities when I engrave this in acrylic versus whether I engrave this in wood. So again, always very important when you're practicing photos and you're trying to perfect your trade is to do the photo, make the adjustment, and then try the same photo on different materials at the same power and speed, and just see how the material, how the photo looks on that different material. I don't want to make a bunch of adjustments because then it's a little bit harder to see how those changes are made. So it's always good to have one photo and then engrave that one photo on a bunch of different materials so you can see how how each material will change based on the power and speed that we're using. So again, now I've made my adjustment. This photo looks a little hideous right now on the screen, but again, I'm putting this on wood, and I'm basically removing detail, and at the end of the day, I'm actually going to see more detail once I laser engrave this. The next step on this typically is I'm going to run a sharpen command on this. For any of those that do a lot of photo editing and printing in full color, sharpening is a pretty standard technique for trying to sort of create a little bit more detail in the face, in the transition areas. Normally when I'm going on wood, I'm going to make this 500, and then I'm going to adjust my radius up or down depending on what I want to do. What I'm trying to do here, again, is have some separation in the white areas versus the dark areas. We don't want the face to be a solid gray. We want to have some white areas, and we want to have some dark areas. Yep. Question is how many pixels? Normally, I use 300 there. Most people typically, at least if you're using 100 PPI, then basically use that. Remember that the 300 DPI is not a printing resolution. It's actually a pixel setting. So normally 100 is good. I use 300, but certainly 100 or higher is normally quite adequate for what you want to do. Sometimes people will use lower numbers to get smaller file size. It's not such a big deal nowadays with computers being a lot faster than they were in the old days. So normally anywhere from 100 to 300 is normally going to be sufficient for what you need to do in terms of the DPI or the DPI, what's called DPI in the resample command. Okay. The next step I'm going to do here, the final step, which again, some programs have this, some programs don't. If your program doesn't have it, you can always bring this into CorelDraw, and CorelDraw can do this same adjustment here that I'm going to do in PhotoPaint. I'm going to convert to black and white. I'm going to use a Jarvis, Stuckey, or Floyd Steinberg error diffusion algorithm. I'll use this Jarvis setting. And you notice what it's done here is it's tried to create black areas based on how much grayscale fills here. So there's no white here, so I get nothing here. A bit of a darker gray is going to give me a closer black dots. A farther away, lighter grayscale image is going to basically make these white areas a little and black dots a little bit wider. I'm going to say okay, and then basically there's my image. Now again, it doesn't look very nice on the screen because if I zoom in, you can see that you get a better rendition of how that image is actually going to engrave. So again, I'm at a zoom factor here, basically out at 100%, and you can see the image is looking fairly good in terms of the quality. Don't be turned off by the way it looks right now. When we laser engrave it, you're actually going to have a fairly good looking image. The next step is to go File, Save As. I'm going to call this a name. I'm going to call it under Webinar. I'm going to save it as a CPT file. Very important because if I save it as a Corel Photo Paint image, it keeps the transparency, which I want to keep if I want to put this on glass or on acrylic, because I need to invert the image after the fact. And again, I can do that in CorelDraw to do that. I'm going to say save. I'm going to go into CorelDraw now. I'm going to get, let's just get rid of this image here. So actually, what would be interesting is to have this image here, and let's import that CPT file in here. So there's the webinar one. And again, you can see I've resized it. You can see the image, you know, in terms of the quality. If I zoom in on this, you can see what's going on here. You know, if I bring this out, let's bring this over here and let's size this down, just a quick resize. So you can see what I've done basically to the image. I can tell you right now, if you take this image here and you laser engrave it, and you do this on a piece of wood, your image is going to look like basically a brown blob. You're not going to get a lot of detail because there's too much detail in this image to laser engrave. I've removed a lot of detail here, and it's that removal of detail that actually will show more detail when I do a finished image. So all I need to do now is basically take my image. I'm going to go File, Print. I'm going to do this on wood. Because I'm doing this on wood, I don't have to do any further adjustment here. Just for if your image doesn't have the black and white conversion in it, if you come up here and you go to your bitmap, you go to mode, grayscale here, you can actually come here and go mode, black and white. So you can see that CorelDraw still has the same tool that was available in PhotoPaint. So if you're working with programs like Photoshop or GIMP and you find that they don't have that conversion to the Jarvis or Stuckey setting, then you can always bring in that adjusted black and white or grayscale image and then do the final adjustment for the black and white inside CorelDraw itself. So I could come in here, go to mode, go to black and white, go to Jarvis. Exactly the same thing I did in in photo paint, and notice here I've got the same basic image. Now it doesn't look the same because I haven't done all the adjustments, but this is a black and white air diffused image, monochrome, and this is the same thing. And you'll notice down here, CorelDraw basically is indicating monochrome, monochrome. Okay. So I'm going to go file print. I'm going to come in here, and basically this image is 4.4 by 0.75. I'm going to use, I'm going to put this on wood, and I have a 120 watt laser I'm using here. So I'm going to basically use, basically, this is Baltic birch, the Trotec plywood, basically a Baltic birch style material, which is a light brown finish. You can see here, I'm not even using full power, and I'm using 100% speed. I'm going to say, okay. I'm going to use 333 DPI. Because this image is in black and white, I don't need to use 500 or 600. All it generates is a lot more burning for me. Doesn't generate. Okay. Oh, you know what? I may have needed to go back when I went to CorelDraw.
Oh.
Right? I didn't come into the screen.
Okay.
Go to screen share.
Oh, you switched. That's why.
Yeah.
I see.
So go to CorelDraw. Yeah, I'm going to go back. I'll start right from the setting. Is it working now? It might take a second. Sorry about that. Basically, when we switch screens, we have to switch. We have to tell Google that we're switching. So, okay. So basically, I've imported the image into CorelDraw. Did you see me import the image into Corel? Okay. I'm going to just start this from scratch again because I don't know if everybody saw this. I'm going to now import that image from PhotoPaint into Corel. There's my image right there. And again, if I zoom in, you notice here that I can see the quality of the image. Don't look at the image from out like this because again, you can't see what it looks like. So zoom in, you can see I've got good detail. Don't worry about the face. This will all come up when we actually laser engrave. So all I need to do now is basically go file print. I'm going to go to preferences. I'm working with basically a 4.5-inch image by 2.75. I'm going to set my power and speed here. Again, 70 power, 100 speed. Again, I'm using 120 watt lasers, so I'm not even using the full amount of power, but I am running as fast as I can. Say okay. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm running at 330 DPI. This is very important because I have a black and white image here. I don't need to run at 600 or 500 DPI for a couple of reasons. One is, for me, that's too much power. I have too many dots. If I run at 600 DPI, that's 600 lines per inch. 333 means 333 lines per inch. A lot of people will transpose that into color or into quality, but when we're doing photographs, we actually don't see that lower quality. So now what ends up happening is I'm actually going to engrave this job twice as fast because I've got half as many lines, and at the end of the day, I'd rather be doing this job twice as fast. So normally I'm running 333 for the actual photograph, and I switch to a black and white mode. You could leave it in order dithering if you want, or you can be in black and white. Okay? So again, if these settings were good, you know, I could come in here, I could, you know, if I felt that those settings were good, I could come in here and I could have a, you know, like a you know, like a, you know, Trotec, you know, plywood. And then I could come in here and make my engraving color 70 and my speed 100. And then I've got and turn my air assist off. I don't want air assist on. Say okay. And now I've actually got a preset for the Trotec plywood. And again, you know, once you start coming up with these settings that are the right settings, then basically remember to save them so that the next time you go to do them, you can also save them. Another thing sometimes I like to do is I will. Sorry.
Oh, it's a different screen for the colors. Yeah, you have to. Here, go into the colors. Okay.
Yeah, I got to go to that screen share.
Yeah. Just do share the desktop.
Full screen.
Oh, that would be better. Yeah.
No, because it keeps showing that.
Right. But you should be okay now. Yeah, now it'll just show you your screen, so you don't have to switch.
Okay.
Anymore. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. So again, sorry about that. We're actually under the power button here. I'm using 70% power, 100% speed. And again, that's what I'm using for 120 watt laser. Again, if you've got a 60 watt, well, then this power setting is going to be maybe 100 power, and maybe your speed's going to be somewhere around 80. Again, you need to adjust it because your 60 watt is less. If you're running a 30 watt laser, well, then that power is going to be 100, and your speed might be down to something like 40. So again, it's a matter of a bit of a trial and error and sort of figure out what you feel is good and bad. So the other thing that I did here was I came down and I actually saved a Trotec setting here for that material. So again, if this setting turns out to be proper for me, then I'm going to come into the wood section. I'm going to create a Trotec plywood setting, and then I'm basically going to create the power and speeds. So the next time I go to do the power and speeds, then everything is left there. If you want, the other thing you could do is if you do a print screen, but you press the print screen button on your keyboard, then what you can do is just say okay, click the JC. We're just going to make this into the middle. I'm going to apply this and then send it over to the laser machine. What you can also do sometimes, if this is a template job, what you can also do is go Control V. And what this does, I'm just going to go up here and crop this. Sometimes when I have a template job like this, I'm basically going to crop the image. And then if I move this off the page, I can save this with the job. So the next time I go to do the job, it actually has that settings for that job saved with the actual job. So again, sometimes, you know, if this is something I use on a regular basis and I want to remember the settings, maybe I don't want to make an actual preset, you can actually save the screen capture with the job so that you then know quickly that it's 70% power and 100% speed. Okay. I believe that they want me to cut this out, so I'm going to use a shape. Let's just use a heart. And that's going to be a red RGB. I'm going to right-click on the toolbar that changes the hairline over the right-click. I'm going to make this hairline, and then we're going to just stretch this out a little bit. Okay, go ahead. Print preference. Okay. Print preference, I think there's a couple of different ways that you can print to the laser machine. I normally just like to send over just the actual image. What a lot of people will do here is they'll actually make the page size basically 6.5 by 6, let's say. So let's make the page size 6.5 by 6. It's a little bit bigger. Again, this is another way that you can do it. You know, I'm certainly not going to send over, you know, if I'm working on a 24-39 inch size bed, I'm not going to send over, I really want to just engrave something that's 6.5 by 5.5, as you can see from up here. So again, another way of sending this over to the machine would be to go file print. Come in here, basically type in 6.5, sorry, 6.75 was the page, and this was 6. AJC. My layout is as in document. So all I'm really doing here is just printing the actual page size. So again, if I apply that and go cancel, you notice here it says 675 by 6, Control P. Let's just get rid of that to make it easier. And then basically come back into preferences, 6.75 by 6. You can see the previews on. If you don't see the preview, that's this button right here. That'll preview for you. So you click on this button right here, and that basically gives you the ability to see a preview of the actual image before we actually send it to the laser machine. So again, I always tell people if you're running in Corel to basically turn this, the first thing you want to do when you print the first time is to click this button, and that gives you that preview there. Say okay, print. Then if I go into the, I'm going to give it a name here. Again, we're going to call it webinar. I'm going to go into job control software here. Again, you notice here, I'm looking at 500 DPI. I've sent over something that's 333. Just double click on that image. So there's my image right there. And I want to do a cutout on the actual material under power and speed. Actually, probably 1.5 is 120 watt. Turn my air assist on. Basically, the machine's telling me it's going to be 2 minutes and 21 seconds to run, and I'm going to run the job. I think, Lev, you wanted to show the photo of this actual running. So we're actually going to show you it running. I get it.
Oh, go ahead, Brent.
So for the process modes, here I'm using a standard setting. Again, I don't typically do a photo optimized because the photo optimized is doing exactly what I did with the Jarvis Stucky, converting it to black and white. I'm not a real fan of using these settings in the print driver because I like to see what the image looks like before I run it to the laser machine. If I use the process options, I don't have that ability. So normally I leave it in standard, black and white, and I do my processing over here. It was basically a process mode of Jarvis Stucky right here. So leave it at standard, leave it at black and white, or you could do order dithering too, and then basically say JC, and then print.
And we'll, yeah, whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
So, Mike, just wondering how different it is, you know, engraving photographs on wood, on acrylic, on metals. I mean, in your experience, what's easier, what's harder?
Yeah, the best looking photos are normally done on things like black brass, aluminum, or anodized aluminum. because they typically give you a finer dot. Wood is normally it's a little bit of a harder product to work with. Takes a little bit more trial and error. And again, acrylic is fine. Glass, again, is similar to the wood settings. So normally when I'm adjusting in wood, I'm using the same adjustment settings for glass. The one thing to remember when you're doing aluminum or glass and acrylic, I'm going to do one after this, is that we need to make sure that we invert the image, because my engraving is going to turn white, not dark. So I need to do a negative of my actual image. Okay. So again, when we're doing this type of product, again, it's very important that you spend some time practicing with a good photo and get an idea what looks differently in wood versus what looks differently in acrylic or glass.
Somebody also asked if this is the same sort of process on a rayjet.
Yes, this process is exactly the same on a rayjet. The only difference on a rayjet is that we need to make sure that we're always working RGB, and I'll make sure I show you that when we go back, when I show you how to invert the image.
Would you ever do a reverse engraving on acrylic for something like a photograph? Oh, for reverse engraving. Okay. Okay, it's almost done.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty good for what we need. That's probably pretty good for what we need to do. We're just going to put, I'm going to stop this.
Oh, you can go to job control. Oh, we got a question.
Yeah, again, somebody's looking to make darker on the wood. Sometimes there's a couple of ways. Yeah, certainly using a little bit more power is certainly one thing you can do. Again, the problem with using too much power is, again, then we have to, it may obliterate our image a little bit more. So again, you've got to be careful when you do that, because you may apply too much power to the actual job. Yeah. We're using a Trotec plywood. And again, this is something that we sell typically at the office here. You can notice that this is basically a pine. Pine product typically goes fairly brown. And again, you know, things like maple and that typically a little bit whiter. You can have a little bit more issue with things like walnut or oak. Oak is very grainy, so certainly something I try to stay away from. I like the plywood because if you notice the plywood, there's little grain in the plywood. It's very, very monotone. There's good contrast here. You know, in the color, there's not a lot of grain in it. You know, walnut is brown on brown, so again, it's a little bit harder to see. And again, you can see on the image, the photo jumps right out at you. If I had left the background in there, then what would have ended up happening is that I would have actually had the photo would have actually the background would have sort of taken away from my photo. Again, another technique you could use, sometimes people will go to a bigger lens. So maybe instead of using a 2-inch lens, you might use a 2.5. Or you could even go to a 1.5-inch lens, which gives you a smaller spot size, and then you could use a little bit more power that way. So probably if you want to get a darker image, maybe try a 1.5-inch lens with a little bit more power. 1.5-inch lens gives you a smaller spot size, which means that you can get away with a little bit more power. Okay.
We got 2 more questions.
Okay, you mentioned that adjusting the power while the machine is running. How do you do that?
The way we adjust the power while we're actually running is right in job control. Yeah. When the machine's actually running, we're in job control here. So what you can do is you can just type in, let's say I want to go 70 to 50. While it's actually running, you could type in 50 power, and that will change the power from 70 to 50. So if you're engraving and you think I need a little bit more power, and you're at 70, then maybe you might put in 80 power. If you're at 100% power, then you can actually then adjust your velocity here, which is your speed, and maybe you might make that, you know, a lower a lower speed to give yourself more power. Again, if you want less power, then you can go from 70 down to 60 or increase your speed up if you want.
What would cause flaming when lasering on glass material using Speedy 360 watt?
Basically, you shouldn't get any glass sharding. If you go on to, do you have my? You got my? Yeah, I've got. If you go onto the Trotec website and you under the YouTube channel, I believe my photo engraving is on there. And if you use pre-mask, that's how you're going to get photos on glass. You shouldn't get any flaming on the glass. If you're getting flaming, to me, that's a little bit too much power, unless you're using the mask. If you're using the mask, you're going to get a little bit of flaming because it's the mask that's flaming up. Again, I would never do photo engraving on glass unless I'm actually using the pre-mask. And again, if you want to learn a little bit more about that technique, then I would suggest that you visit our YouTube channel and then search out for the laser engraving on photos on glass. It's in the training section playlist. Yes. Okay.
So, do we want to talk about acrylic?
Okay. If you want to do acrylic, again, what we want to do on that is we want to actually come into Corel here, and I'm just going to get rid of my border here for a second, and I'm going to just cut that out. If I want to put this on glass or I want to put this on acrylic, what I need to do now is basically just come up to Effects, Transform, and I got to invert it. Okay, and you notice here now that I've actually got an actual negative of the image. Now for you Rayjet users, I believe there's a few of them here, you notice here that the colors are actually CMYK, and probably would be a good thing even if you're using, you know, the Speedy machines. What I normally do on that is if you right click on the black, then you notice that this is now changed RGB. You need to do this for the Rayjet. You also need to get rid of this white for the Rayjet here. And the way you do that is you left click on the X at the top right hand corner up here. And you notice now I've got none right here. So for Rayjet, this outside line has to be RGB black, and the fill needs to be none. Okay. If I take this image here, now I want to take this image and I want to invert it. So I want to do it on glass. Then basically now it's going to invert it because whatever I laser engrave was going to be white. And if I didn't make this adjustment, then when I laser engrave my image, it's going to look like the negative on the glass. And again, we might do this from behind. So we may do a mirror on this. And then basically all I need to do now is go File, Print. I'm not going to worry about cutting this out. I'm going to come in here on acrylic. I'm going to use a lot less power on acrylic because I don't want to have any depth. I want a nice white image. I'm going to use 35 power for my acrylic. So now I'm using half the power that I'm using for wood. And again, this is because I've tested for the acrylic and I know what power and speed to work with. So again, you need to be able to have your powers already done before you go ahead and do the material. You might even have a section in here called photos. You may have a section, you might have something here called the one for acrylic. And you may have one in here for, you know, wood. And one for granite. So again, you may actually classify your presets based on the process of doing photos. So again, that just really depends on what you're typically doing with your settings. So again, this is going to be 35. I'm going to use 100 speed. Say okay. Again, all my processes are still the same. I'm standard process mode. I'm 333 on resolution. My half toning is black. I'm going to click the JC. I'm going to go File, Print. Say apply.
Yeah, we just had a quick question about the masking mic. When people are talking about when they should put it, when engraving, when cutting, or on both.
Typically, when I'm talking about masking for photos, I'm actually talking about glass. And again, the masking, certainly we sometimes use masking in other applications, whether we're paint filling or whether we're using the masking to stop staining on our edges of our wood that we're cutting out. And when we're talking, because we're talking about photos, I'll sort of keep it relegated to that. You can't get photos on a piece of glass unless you use the pre-mask, which is the white transfer mask that we sell at the office here. And again, you place that on the glass and then you etch through the glass using a image exactly as if you're doing it on acrylic. So what I've done is I've gone in and I basically done a mirror image on the image so it's inverted, and basically now I'm going to etch through the transfer mask, which gives me a nice fine finish on the actual glass itself. Okay. Yep. I need to just focus to the material. Yep. So we could do an autofocus. We typically like to do a manual focus, especially with clear acrylic, because typically our light isn't going to pick it up. Yeah, Speedy 150 watt. I would, for wood, I'd probably be looking at, I would start at 100 power and 100 speed. So we're going to do the acrylic now. No, I'm just going to press go here. Oh, you're up top left corner? Okay.
So the acrylic we're actually using is our Troglass Clear 3mm translucent. Sorry, not clear. The color gloss fluorescent. Thank you. Sorry. And the fluorescent actually comes in 4 colors, I believe.
So again, if you just want to go back to one of the previous questions, if I want to adjust the power a little bit, I just need to swipe this, and let's say I want to go to 30. I just type in 30, and then, oh, that's right, sorry. The job control. Oh yeah, right. Sorry about that. If I want to change my power and speed, remember this was originally 35. If I want to change my power as I'm actually running, I can actually come in here and type in 30. Now the power going to the laser is actually going to be 30. Now we might see a bit of a change in the engraving, but that's basically how easy it is to change the power as you're actually running the job. So sometimes, you might start running and then say, oh, geez, I need a little bit more power. I need a little less power. You can actually invoke less power or more power while the machine's actually running. So again, this gives you a little bit better idea to be able to judge the photograph with a couple of different powers on it. Yes, I've inverted it. I've inverted it, and then I've reversed it.
And then the other question was, is the speed setting always based on percentage, not inches or millimeters per second?
Yeah, the question is the percentage based on inches per second or millimeters per second? Basically, what that speed setting is here is this machine is running at 140 inches a second. The 300 and the 360, the 400 run 140 inches a second. The Speedy 100 runs at 110 inches a second. So when I say 100% speed, I'm talking about 140 inches per second when I'm raster engraving. When I look at the vector engraving, So let's say I'm cutting, and I say I want to use 3. That's 3% of 140 inches a second. So basically, you would divide 3 into 140, and you would have something like basically, maybe about 4 inches per second. So again, that number, if I go down to 2, then you're less. Down to 1, we're even less. So we're using a percentage of 140 inches per second.
So it should be on this side.
Yeah. Yep. This gets a little bit blown out a little bit just because of the lighting, but really we've got a very good looking photograph of what we're working with. And we've been using, I use half the power of the wood setting. So again, you can see that you can't just use the same setting for every type of material. I didn't do any different adjustments to the image. And if you hold the wood one up beside you put the wood one up beside the acrylic one, the acrylic one actually shows more detail. And again, that's just because of the nature of wood versus acrylic. I typically like to say, if you read that PowerPoint presentation that I did, I talk about porous product versus a non-porous product, and wood is a very porous product. So, when you laser engrave it, you use less detail because it's so porous, it doesn't show the detail. So again, you can see that difference in acrylic versus what we see in the wood. Yeah, we can do ROI. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe we should do. We're getting close to.
The cutoff. Okay. Yeah. So just is there any other questions? Because we're close to finishing this segment. Want to have a seat?
I can.
Okay. So yeah, just to let you guys know that we will be posting this video on our YouTube channel pretty much right after we're finished. If you have any other questions, you can always leave them in the comments of the video, and we'll try and answer them as much as possible. Yeah, we did go over a bit.
We intend to do this a lot more often. So, certainly if you let us, if you appreciate this, let us know. We apologize, for the first time that we may have had some technical glitches and things like that. But, certainly if you feel that you're looking for some certain things that you want to have discussed, and then let Lev know, or put them in the comments field, or let one of the reps know, or let me know. And certainly we would certainly like to do that. The other thing, while we're waiting, do we have a question? Is the Trotec UniDrive software available in Canada? Yes, it is. If you want to use that, then you need to get a hold of one of your tech, get a hold of the tech department, and they will look at getting you a copy of that so that you can basically use it. The UniDriver basically allows us to we have some people using it for web type applications where they have the laser machine is the UniDriver's monitoring a folder, and the web orders come into the folder, and then basically that information is automatically transferred right to job control, and the operator then basically can start running the machine. So.
Yeah, sorry. We did have a couple of people asking in terms of annealing, not right now, but when we send out the e-blast, setting different levels on acrylic. Not sure. Yeah.
So again, if you're looking at doing some different levels on somebody's asking about doing different levels on acrylic. Typically, what we would want to do is I'm in CorelDraw now. Let's get rid of the photograph. You normally would have this is going to be really basic, but you're going to have a red box, and then you're going to have a black circle, And then we're basically going to go file print. And let's say, for example, that we want the red to be deeper than we want the black. So what we do is we come in here, we set the, the black color. Let's say we want it to be less. So maybe we want that 50 power, and then we want the red to engrave. And we set that to 100 power, 100 speed. And the air assist off. We never have the air assist on unless we're cutting. And then say OK. And make sure that you set this setting in here to color. And when you set this to color, basically the driver is going to pick up the power and speeds for whatever's in each one of the colors. If you leave this in order dithering, then the software is going to try to dither the black and the red, and it's going to disregard the different power and speeds that you have in there for the red. So make sure this is set to color, still set on process option of standard, and make sure that you've both say engrave and engrave. So what it's going to do is it's going to do all the red, all the black first, and then it's going to do all the red second. If you had a third color like blue, it'll do that, and it'll do the order and basically the way it's laid out in the screen here. Same way as it would do a vector line. Another question? How would the auto basically affect the DPI setting? Again, typically, certainly using the auto setting is certainly something that I would normally do just as a default. I using 1000 PPI on my setting here because I wanted to get a little bit, again, this might be a way of getting a little bit more brown on your image by going to 1000. But again, certainly setting an auto is sort of a good starting point if you want to get a little bit of a darker image. You may try to pump it up to 1000. The reason we don't use air assist when we're engraving is because when we're shooting air down onto the cutting surface, we're actually defeating the purpose of the laser. We're actually cooling the area. And normally what I like to do is I like to turn that off. Normally I like to turn the air off because the only time we really want to blow a flame out is normally in cutting. Normally I like to keep the air off. The only time I use air when I'm engraving is normally when I'm maybe doing a rubber stamp. So I know the presets do come with air on there. The factory does that because they typically like to think that it cleans the optics a little bit more. But I think that my thought pattern is that I think it's a little bit more detrimental to the quality of the engraving. Normally I'll turn it off. So the only time I turn air on is when I'm cutting. Just a couple of things here. Lev has switched it, but I'm just going to go back to the full screen and just a couple of places for you to go for some extra help. As Lev mentioned, we've got everybody knows about the Trotec YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube if you want. And if you search out, actually probably just type in, don't search out Mike Clark because you'll get a zillion people. But if you type in FME Clark, then you'll have my channel. I've got 78 videos on there, and there are some good help tutorials on there on the rotary attachment. Here's the one on doing photos on glass. And again, it's a 21 minute type video that basically goes through, how to do glass engraving, how to place the mask on the glass. So there's a lot of stuff there. The other place, if you want to go, is sublimation.ca or engrave.ca. And if you go there, come on. There it is. But basically, this is my website. I've had this for a number of years. And again, you can come in here. And again, if you're interested in doing photos, well, you might come up. Here's a photograph section right here. Or there again, here's one images are on wood or better with no background. So let's pull that one up. And you can see, here's my test photo. And again, I take you through the step-by-step. So again, if you didn't write all this down, you can go onto this website and it shows you basically how to do this. And if you get down to the bottom here, just to show you, you can see, here's the image engraved with the background. And you notice the background, you can hardly see the heads of the people here. If you come down here, you can see that when I cut them out and I laser engrave them, you can see there's a lot more detail. So again, it's always very, very important that we actually get rid of the background on the actual image, especially when we're putting it on glass or acrylic or things like that. So, okay. Yeah, when I'm basically using when I'm engraving rubber stamps, I normally use air assist for the engraving part because we're trying to blow some of the dust away from the area that we're engraving. Sometimes you can use the air assist. Again, it's a little bit of a matter. It's a bit of a preference of what you want to do. I have done rubber stamps both ways where I haven't used air assist, and I've done them when I'm actually with the air assist. Again, you got to be a bit careful when you're using the air assist because if you've got a fair bit of dust on rubber stamps, and if you're using a lot of air on it, then basically you're going to blow the dust around in the machine. So again, certainly something that I would test to make sure you're happy using the air, or maybe it might be better just not to use the air.
Okay, I think we're good. So just wanted to let everyone know, obviously this was sort of a photo engraving webinar. We wanted to talk more about annealing and ROI. We just didn't get to it really. So the next webinars we'll do specifically for annealing, ROI, and obviously the flex technology. So I hope everyone enjoyed. And yeah, this video will be posted, and thanks everyone for participating. So we'll definitely do more webinars in the future. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Oh, webpage address. We'll post it in the description, but it's www.sublimation.ca or engrave.ca, engrave.ca. If you have any problems, just email me. We'll put my email link in the show notes too.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.